The sun had just started to rise when Elias opened his eyes. The soft orange light slipped through the blinds, painting long lines across the quiet apartment. For a few seconds everything was still. No sound, no movement, only the slow hum of the air filters. Then came the gentle rhythm he had grown used to over the past months, the light tapping of footsteps, careful and quiet, followed by the faint sound of humming. It was Lyra. She was already awake, as always. She never slept in, never delayed her chores, and never once complained about anything. Her movements were graceful and silent, like a dancer trying not to wake a sleeping child. Every morning she would start by cleaning the small living room, arranging every item in perfect order. Books stacked neatly, furniture dusted, floor shining. Then she would prepare the boiling water for his tea, humming softly under her breath, a tune that didn't sound human but carried a strange, comforting calm. Elias watched her for a moment before sitting up. She wasn't human, not even close. Her species, the Ryan, were tall and elegant beings with soft pearl-gray skin that shimmered faintly under light. Her hair was fine and silver, flowing like silk down her back. Two delicate fins ran along the sides of her neck, glowing faint blue whenever she breathed deeply. Her eyes were perhaps the most striking, bright and bioluminescent, glowing softly with color that changed depending on her emotion. Right now they were calm blue, the color of silence. Elias didn't know much about the Ron people. He only knew they had come to Earth 5 years ago after something called the Great Solar Accord, a peace treaty signed between their kind and humans after decades of misunderstanding and tension. Many Ron now worked alongside humans, helping to rebuild cities, clean oceans, or serve as caretakers. Lyra was one of them. She had been assigned to him by the Integration Office when he applied for domestic help. At first he thought having an alien maid would feel strange. But Lyra wasn't just efficient. She was kind, respectful, and almost too careful. She followed every instruction perfectly and anticipated every need before he even spoke it. Still, there was something about her that never quite felt normal. She never relaxed even when the work was done. Even when Elias told her to rest, she stayed alert, back straight, hands clasped, eyes lowered. It was as if she was waiting for something, or maybe afraid of something. He didn't know what. That morning, as he stepped into the kitchen, he decided to greet her first. "Good morning, Lyra," he said softly. She froze mid-step, almost like a startled animal. Then she turned quickly, lowering her head. "Good morning, Master Elias," she replied, her voice gentle and musical but filled with caution. He frowned slightly. "You don't need to call me Master, Lyra. Just Elias is fine." She hesitated, her glowing eyes flickering for a moment, from blue to a pale green, then back to blue. It was clear she didn't know how to respond. "Yes, Master Elias," she said again, bowing lightly. He sighed, half smiling but also feeling a strange heaviness in his chest. As he sat at the table, she poured him tea with perfect precision. Her hands were steady, her movements mechanical. He noticed how she always kept at least 2 full steps away from him. If he leaned forward or reached out, she would instinctively step back. It wasn't rudeness, it was fear. Elias pretended not to notice, but inside he couldn't stop thinking about it. What could make someone so cautious, so ready to retreat from even the smallest approach? He watched her quietly. The glow from her skin reflected off the metal counter, soft and beautiful. But her eyes, those eyes, looked tired even though she smiled politely. She never looked at him directly for more than a second. He tried to remember if he had ever done anything that might have scared her. He hadn't. He barely raised his voice, never touched her, never scolded her for mistakes. But something deeper than memory seemed to control her reactions. Something old. Something painful. As he finished his tea, she stood near the sink, waiting silently for his next command. "Lyra," he said gently, "you don't have to wait like that. You can rest a bit. I'll clean up later." She shook her head immediately. "That is not allowed," she said softly. He frowned. "Allowed by who?" She paused, blinking rapidly. For a second he thought she might answer. But then her eyes dimmed and she whispered, "It is just how it is." And then she went back to cleaning. Elias leaned back in his chair, watching her with quiet sadness. Something about her words stayed with him. It is just how it is. He didn't know what it meant yet. But deep inside he could feel that her quiet fear was not born in his home. It was carried here, from another world, another life, and perhaps from memories she couldn't forget. That morning, as the sun rose higher and her humming filled the kitchen again, Elias made a silent promise to himself. He would find out what made her afraid, and he would help her feel safe again. He just didn't know yet how deep her fear truly went. The next day started quietly. Like always, the city outside was alive with the morning rush. Sky cars humming past windows, the distant chatter of people, the endless pulse of life. But inside Elias's apartment it felt like another world. Calm still, almost fragile. Lyra was cleaning again. She moved slowly around the kitchen, her hands careful, her steps measured, the faint glow of her skin reflected against the white tiles. She looked peaceful from afar, but Elias had begun to notice the tiny details others wouldn't. The way her fingers twitched when something clattered too loudly, the way her tail stiffened when he spoke suddenly, the quick breath she took every time someone walked behind her. It was fear, deep and silent. He wanted to understand it, not out of curiosity, but because he couldn't stand seeing anyone live like that. He had been a soldier once. He had seen people tremble from pain and hunger. He had seen fear break men stronger than steel. But seeing that same fear in someone who just wanted to clean his home, that broke something inside him. That morning, he tried something different. He didn't warn her this time. He walked softly toward the kitchen, hoping to surprise her with a simple thank you. She was standing by the counter washing the cups, humming that same alien tune. For a moment, he simply watched her, how her glowing hair shimmered under the light. Then he stepped closer. "Lyra," he said softly. The reaction was instant. Her whole body froze. The cup slipped from her hand, fell, and shattered on the floor. She didn't move, not even a blink. Her hands were stiff, her shoulders tight, her breath completely stopped. Elias's heart dropped. He took a step forward. "It's okay, Lyra, it's just a cup." Still no response. Her eyes were wide and glowing a sharp white blue, a color he hadn't seen before. It looked like panic. He reached out slowly, trying not to startle her more. "You're fine, no harm done." "Finally," she whispered, her voice shaking. "Please, and step back, Master Elias." Elias froze. The words didn't sound like a request. They sounded like a plea. "Lyra," he began, but she flinched. "Please," she said again, almost in tears. "Please step back." He slowly stepped backward, raising his hand slightly to show he meant no harm. As soon as he did, her breathing returned. She pressed both hands to her chest, shaking violently, her tail curling tightly around her legs. "I didn't mean to scare you," he said gently. "I'm sorry. I just wanted to thank you for—" She shook her head fast. "No, it was my fault. I should have heard you coming. I will be more careful." Her voice broke halfway through the sentence. Elias didn't know what to say. The way she stood there, trembling like a cornered animal, made his stomach twist with guilt. He wanted to tell her she was safe, that no one would hurt her. But when he looked at her eyes, he realized, and it wasn't him she was seeing. It was someone else. Someone from her past. "Lyra," he said softly. "No one's angry. You didn't do anything wrong." Her lips trembled. "I dropped it. That means correction, correction," he repeated, confused. She blinked fast, realizing she had said too much. "I mean, punishment," she whispered, almost like it was a forbidden word. The air in the room turned heavy. Elias felt his jaw tighten. "Who punished you, Lyra?" She didn't answer. Instead, she knelt quickly, gathering the broken glass pieces with her bare hands, cutting herself in the process. "Stop," he said, reaching forward. She jerked back again, eyes wide with terror. "Please, don't touch me." Elias froze where he stood. His heart ached. He didn't move, afraid that any step forward might hurt her more than any wound. The blood from her small cuts dripped onto the floor as she cleaned silently, refusing to look at him. He could hear her quiet sobs, and not loud, not desperate, but the kind that came from years of holding it in. When she finally finished, she stood up and whispered without looking at him. "It will not happen again, Master Elias." He didn't reply. He couldn't. His throat was tight with emotion he couldn't name, anger, sadness, guilt, all tangled together. She left the kitchen quietly. Her glowing eyes dimmed almost to gray. Elias stood alone in the silence, staring at the broken cup she had thrown away. Something was terribly wrong. He sat down, running a hand through his hair. The world had told him the Ron were peaceful allies, happy to work alongside humans. But that wasn't what he saw in Lyra's eyes. That was not peace, and that was survival. And that night, as he lay awake, one thought haunted him again and again. What kind of life did she live before she came here? That night, sleep refused to come to Elias. He lay in bed staring at the ceiling, the image of Lyra trembling on the kitchen floor stuck in his mind. Her words, "Please step back, Master Elias Imrian," kept echoing again and again. The fear in her voice had not been the fear of the moment. It was the fear of memory. Something had taught her that being too close to a human meant pain. He turned on the small bedside lamp and sat up. The apartment was quiet, but his thoughts weren't. He couldn't stop wondering what correction had meant, or why she had spoken like a person who was once trained to obey through fear. Elias had been a soldier before peace returned. He had seen cruelty before. Humans were not innocent creatures. He knew that sometimes, in the name of control or greed, people could do horrible things to those weaker than them. And yet it felt different hearing it now. Not from an enemy, but from someone who lived quietly in his own home, trying her best to serve. He opened his data tablet and started searching through the public archives. He typed the words "Ron Domestic Service Program." The screen filled with reports, laws, and old government notes. Most of it looked clean and positive. Official talk about cooperation, equality, and interspecies harmony. But he had learned in the army that the truth always hid beneath the headlines. He went deeper, into the older records, the pre-accord years, and then he found it. Buried under a government document was a line that made his blood run cold. Behavioral conditioning for RAN labor class. Step-back training mandatory. Obedience reinforcement to prevent harm to human supervisors. Elias stared at the words for a long time. His jaw tightened. Step-back training. That was exactly what she had done, freezing and stepping away every time he came close. It wasn't just habit. It was programming. He clicked further and found footage, old grainy security clips from outer colonies. In them, Ron workers wore metallic collars that sent shocks whenever they disobeyed or failed to step aside fast enough. Humans stood over them, giving commands like they were machines. He couldn't watch more. He closed the tablet and sat still, his hands shaking with quiet rage. Lyra had been one of them. He opened her registry ID on his personal file, the one he had signed when she was assigned to him. There, under her name, he saw the tag. Recovered labor asset, number 492. Subject rehabilitated after Ron-human conflict. Approved for civil domestic service and recovered. Asset. They didn't even call her a person. Elias felt sick. He remembered how she flinched when he said her name, how she whispered punishment like it was a curse she could never escape. He suddenly understood that her fear was not about him. It was about what humans had once done to her kind. He stood and walked to the window. The city lights shimmered below, peaceful and bright, a picture of unity between worlds. But he knew now that behind that beauty there were scars no treaty could erase. The next morning, Lyra greeted him as usual. She smiled softly, but her eyes were dull, like someone who had forgotten how real happiness felt. "Good morning, Master Elias," she said politely. He hesitated, looking at her face. "Lyra, can I ask you something?" She tilted her head slightly, unsure. "Of course, if it is allowed," he frowned. "You don't have to ask what's allowed. You can talk freely here." Her eyes flickered, a brief light of confusion mixed with fear. "Yes, Master Elias," he sighed softly. "Lyra, where were you before you came here? Before the integration office sent you?" Her hand stopped moving. The cloth she was holding fell from her fingers. For a long moment she said nothing. Finally her voice came, small and trembling. "I was on a colony. A mining station. Was it bad?" he asked gently. She didn't look up. "It was training. They said we must learn to serve correctly. If we did not step away when approached, we were corrected." Her voice cracked at that word and she pressed her lips together tightly. "It was not always humans," she whispered. "Sometimes it was those who wanted us to be useful. We were not people to them. We were labor units." Elias felt a lump in his throat. He didn't interrupt her. She looked at him finally, her glowing eyes wet. "When you walk behind me, my body still remembers the pain. Even if my mind knows you will not hurt me, the body does not believe." He took a slow breath. "Lyra," he said softly. No one should live in fear of being near someone. Not anymore. Not here. Her eyes flickered again, faint hope mixing with sorrow. Hope is dangerous, she whispered. It was not allowed before. Elias clenched his fists under the table, hiding the emotion rising in his chest. That night, as she retired to her small quarters, he sat alone again, staring at the faint light under her door. He had thought kindness was enough. But now he realized that kindness meant nothing if he didn't also help her break free from the invisible chain still wrapped around her heart. And so, quietly he made himself a new promise, not just to be kind, but to help her believe she was free. The next morning came with a gray sky. The city's tall towers disappeared behind the mist, and the soft hum of hover traffic was replaced by rain tapping gently against the windows. The whole world felt quiet. A good kind of quiet. Elias sat at the dining table watching Lyra move around the kitchen as usual. She was calm today, her motions slow and almost peaceful. The sound of the rain made the apartment feel warm and safe. But even then, he could see her every careful gesture, every small hesitation before she turned her back to him. It was like she was still living in a shadow that only she could see. He thought about everything he had learned the night before, the documents, the old videos, and the truth that still hurt to think about. Lyra had lived most of her life believing that every wrong step could bring pain. He wanted to help her, but he knew rushing her would only make things worse. Fear wasn't a chain you could break with one kind word. It had to be healed slowly with patience. Lyra, he said softly. She turned, her hands instantly still. Yes, Master Elias? He smiled gently. You can just call me Elias. We talked about this, remember? Her eyes flickered pale green. A color he had learned meant confusion mixed with worry. It feels improper. Maybe, he said. But sometimes being improper is what makes us free. She blinked at that, not understanding. But she gave a small nod. I will try. He stood up, trying to act casual. Let's do something different today, he said. Her posture stiffened slightly. Different? Yes, he said, smiling. No cleaning, no chores. Just tea and rest. You can sit too, I can? She asked softly, her voice uncertain. He nodded. Of course. You live here, don't you? She hesitated for a long time, then finally pulled out a chair, carefully, like touching something fragile. She sat down across from him, her back straight and her hands neatly folded in her lap. It was strange to her, sitting as an equal, but Elias could see she was trying. He poured her a cup of tea. She stared at it like she didn't know what to do. You drink it, he said, smiling. Slowly, she lifted the cup to her lips. For a moment, her glowing eyes softened. It's warm, she whispered. Elias smiled again. That's the point. There was silence for a while, the kind that wasn't awkward, just quiet and real. He studied her expression as she looked out the window. The rainlight made her skin glow faint silver. Then he decided to take a small step, a gentle test. He stood up and walked around the table, his footsteps soft against the floor. Lyra's eyes followed him for a second, but then she looked down quickly. When he came closer, she tensed. He could see her breath quicken, her shoulders rise slightly. He stopped a few feet behind her. Lyra, he said quietly, I'm behind you right now, but I won't move closer. I want to see something. Can you stay where you are? Her voice trembled. I can try, he said nothing else. The sound of rain filled the silence. For a long moment, neither of them moved. Lyra's hands tightened around the cup. Her breathing was shallow. Every instinct in her body screamed at her to stand up, to move away, to obey the old command buried deep in her mind. She could almost feel the ghost of pain around her neck, the memory of the electric collar she had once worn. But then she remembered Elias's words. No one will hurt you here. Her eyes closed. She took a slow, shaking breath. I can stay, she whispered. Elias's heart clenched. He didn't move, didn't speak. He just stood there quietly, giving her the silence she needed, the silence of safety. After a long moment, she set the cup down and turned her head slightly, her voice almost breaking. I stayed, she said, almost like a child telling a secret. Elias smiled softly. You did, he said. You stayed. Her eyes flickered faint gold, the color of something he had never seen in her before. Hope. For the rest of the day, Lyra worked with a little more calmness. Her steps were lighter, her humming softer but warmer. She still kept her distance, but something invisible had shifted. For the first time, fear didn't rule every move she made. That night, as Elias sat by the window, he looked over at her room door. Through the small crack of light beneath it, he could hear her humming again. The same alien tune, but slower, gentler. He smiled to himself. He didn't know how long it would take, but he could already see it happening. The slow, fragile process of trust being born. And he knew one thing for sure. Healing didn't begin with freedom. It began with feeling safe enough to stay still. The day of the storm came suddenly. Elias had gone out for supplies that afternoon, and when he returned, dark clouds were already swallowing the sky. The wind roared through the tall towers, shaking the glass panels of nearby buildings. By evening, the rain turned violent, a pounding rhythm that made even the walls of his apartment tremble. The lights flickered once, twice, and then the power went out. The silence that followed wasn't peaceful. It was heavy, filled with the sound of distant thunder and the sharp cry of wind. The backup emergency lights glowed faint red through the hall, making everything look strange and haunted. Elias set the bags down and called softly, "Lyra?" No answer. He walked further inside. "Lyra, where are you?" Still nothing. He frowned. Usually she would appear instantly, ready to assist. But this silence, it didn't feel right. Then, faintly, from the far corner of the kitchen, he heard something, a small broken sound. He turned toward it and froze. Lyra was on the floor, curled up tightly with her hands over her ears, trembling violently. The faint glow of her eyes flashed white-blue again. The color he had seen once before, the color of panic. Her breathing was shallow, desperate. "Lyra," he said quickly, stepping forward. She flinched hard, pressing herself against the wall. "No, please don't," she screamed. "I'll obey. Please don't hurt me." Elias stopped dead in his tracks, his heart breaking. "It's me," he said softly. "It's Elias, you're safe." She shook her head wildly. "No, the alarms. The correction will come." "I can't." Only then did he notice the faint hum in the room, the sound of the emergency system restarting. It must have reminded her of something. Maybe the same alarms that once meant pain, punishment, or worse. "Lyra," he said gently, his voice calm, even though his chest ached. "No one's going to hurt you. There's no correction here. You're safe." But she couldn't hear him. The fear was too deep, too loud. Her body shook like a leaf in the wind, her glowing skin flickering like a broken light. Elias knelt slowly on the floor, keeping his distance. He didn't want to scare her more. "Lyra," he said softly, "look at me." She shook her head, tears running down her cheeks. "It hurts. It always hurts. Please make it stop." He swallowed hard, his voice cracking. "No one will hurt you again, Lyra. Not while I'm here." He moved just a little closer, his hand resting lightly on the floor so she could see it. Open, harmless, human. "Look," he whispered. No shocks, no commands, just me. For a long time she didn't move. Then slowly her trembling hands lowered. Her eyes found his. The bright glow had softened into a faint blue, trembling like candlelight. "Elias?" she whispered, her voice so small it almost broke him. "Yes," he said, smiling gently through the lump in his throat. "It's just me." The lights flickered again. She flinched, gasping sharply. Without thinking, Elias reached forward and took her hand. Her skin was cold and wet, her fingers shaking in his. She froze, expecting pain. But none came. His hand stayed there, warm, steady, safe. "It's all right," he said again. "The sound is just the storm. Nothing else. You're safe here." Tears rolled down her cheeks freely now. She looked at their joined hands as if she didn't understand how it could be real. "No pain?" she whispered. "Never," he said. For the first time since he had met her, she didn't pull away. The storm raged outside, lightning flashing through the red emergency light, and thunder shook the walls, but in that small corner everything was quiet. She leaned forward slightly, still trembling, but this time not from fear. Her forehead rested against his shoulder. Elias didn't move. He just let her be. They stayed like that for a long time, a broken past and a kind heart, sharing silence while the world howled around them. When the power finally came back, the lights turned bright again. Lyra blinked as if waking from a long nightmare. She looked up at him, her voice weak but steady. "I didn't run away," she said softly. He smiled, brushing a tear from her cheek. "No, you didn't." Her eyes glowed faint gold again, that color of hope he had begun to recognize. "Maybe I can learn," she whispered. Elias nodded. "You already have." That night, as the storm faded into a soft drizzle, Lyra fell asleep for the first time without locking her door. And Elias sat nearby, watching the gentle light from her room spill into the hallway. A quiet reminder that sometimes, healing didn't come from grand gestures, but from standing beside someone long enough for their fear to fade. Outside, the world was still storming, but inside, peace had finally begun. The morning after the storm was peaceful. Soft sunlight passed through the glass walls, touching the floor with warmth. The city outside was quiet, washed clean by the rain, shining like it had been reborn. Elias stood by the kitchen counter making tea when he heard soft footsteps behind him. It was Lyra. She looked different, calm, quiet, and almost human in the way she carried herself. Her silver hair fell over her shoulders and her eyes had turned a steady gold, glowing gently in the light. For a moment, Elias simply watched her. She was no longer the frightened being who trembled at every sound. There was still fear somewhere inside her, yes, but now it didn't control her. "Good morning," she said softly. Elias smiled. "Good morning, Lyra." She stood there for a second, as if uncertain what to do next. Her hands brushed against the countertop, her fingers tracing the smooth surface. A small sign that she was grounding herself in the moment. "I didn't mean to lose control last night," she said quietly. "You must think I am weak." Elias shook his head. "No, I think you're stronger than you know." She looked down, her lips trembling slightly. "You stayed," she whispered. "When I couldn't think, you stayed." "I told you I would," he replied simply. Her glowing eyes softened. And for the first time she smiled. Not the mechanical smile she once used to please humans, but something real, fragile, alive. The next few days felt lighter. Lyra began to hum softly while working, sometimes forgetting to hide her voice. She helped Elias clean the storage room, rearranged the broken shelves, and even started to ask questions about Earth, about birds, music, and why humans planted flowers even though they died each season. Elias would answer her patiently, always amazed by her curiosity. "We grow them because they remind us that beauty can exist even for a short time," he said once. She thought about that for a long moment, then replied softly, "I think I am like that flower." He smiled gently. "Maybe, but you're still growing." But one memory still haunted her. The memory of that moment when Elias had stood behind her and she froze. The fear that lived in her body still whispered that she couldn't trust anyone that close. It was a quiet battle she fought each day, even when she smiled. One evening, she decided she wanted to try again. Elias was in the workshop, repairing a small, old hover lamp that had stopped working. The faint blue light shimmered weakly in his hands. Lyra stood in the doorway watching him. Her heart pounded hard in her chest, her fingers trembling. She wanted to prove to herself that she was no longer a slave to fear. "Elias," she called softly. He looked up, smiling warmly. "Hey, Lyra, what's wrong?" "Nothing," she said quickly. "I just want to try something." "Okay," he said, curious. "What is it?" She took a deep breath. "Can you stand behind me?" He froze for a second, realizing what she meant. "Are you sure?" She nodded. "Yes, I want to see if I can move, if I can stay calm." Elias slowly put down his tools and stood up. His steps were light as he moved around the table. Lyra's breath quickened with each sound of his foot on the floor. Her instinct screamed for her to step away, to run, to hide, but she didn't. He stopped behind her, keeping a respectful distance. The silence in the room felt heavy, almost sacred. "You don't have to do this," he said softly. "I do," she whispered. "For me." Her body trembled once. Her hands clenched into fists. She closed her eyes, taking a slow breath. In her mind, she saw flashes of the past. The cold metal floors, the harsh voices, the pain. But then she remembered his voice that night, gentle and steady. "You're safe here." That thought became her anchor. The fear began to fade. Not completely, but enough for her to breathe. She felt his presence behind her, warm, human, real. And this time, it didn't hurt. Minutes passed before she whispered, her voice trembling but proud. "I didn't move." Elias smiled, though she couldn't see it. "You didn't." She turned her head slightly, just enough to look at him over her shoulder. "Thank you," she said softly. "For what?" "For being behind me and not making me afraid." Something in those words hit Elias deep in his chest. He nodded slowly. "Always, Lyra. I'll always be behind you. Not to control you, but to protect you." Her eyes shimmered gold once again, but this time, it wasn't just light. It was hope. It was life. She faced forward again, exhaled deeply, and whispered to herself, "Then maybe I can finally step forward." That night, she didn't lock her door again. And for the first time, she dreamed, not of commands, not of pain, but of walking freely under sunlight. With someone behind her she no longer feared. It was small, fragile but real, and the beginning of freedom. Weeks passed. The city returned to its ordinary rhythm. The hum of traffic, the chatter of people, the flashing lights in the distance. But inside Elias's apartment, something quiet and beautiful had grown. Lyra was no longer just an alien maid following commands. She laughed now. She asked questions, even teased him sometimes when he burned the toast. She was learning how to live. Yet both of them knew this peace couldn't last forever. One afternoon, a government drone arrived, sleek, silver, and cold. It hovered by the balcony door, flashing an identification signal. Elias opened it carefully, his chest tightening when he saw the message on the holographic screen. "All non-registered alien assistants must report to central processing for reclassification." He looked toward Lyra. She was standing by the window, watching the clouds. The sunlight painted her golden eyes brighter than ever. "Lyra," he said softly, "they found out you're here." She turned slowly, the light fading from her face. "Reclassification," she whispered. "That means they will erase everything. My memory, my emotions, even you." Elias clenched his fists. "I won't let that happen." She shook her head gently. "You can't stop them, Elias. They control everything." "Then we'll run," he said quickly. "I'll take you somewhere far, off-grid colonies maybe. Somewhere they won't find you." Her lips trembled, but her voice was calm. "If they catch you helping me, they'll punish you too. Humans aren't allowed to protect our kind." "I don't care," Elias said sharply, stepping closer. "You're not a machine, Lyra. You're someone. And I'm not going to let them take that away." Tears filled her glowing eyes. "Why?" she whispered. "Why would you risk everything for me?" "Because you stood your ground," he said softly. "Because you learned to turn around and face your fear. And because I can't stand by and watch them break you again." For a long time, she didn't speak. The hum of the drone filled the silence like a warning. Then she said, "I have a way. But if it means you'll lose me." Elias stared at her. "What do you mean?" She stepped closer, her hands trembling as they reached for his. "There is a memory shield I can activate. It will hide my identity, make them think I was deactivated. But once I use it, I won't remember this place or you." Elias felt something inside him crack. "Lyra, no. There has to be another way." She smiled gently, though tears were rolling down her cheeks. "There isn't, but I want you to know, before I forget, that you taught me what it means to be free. Even if I won't remember, I'll carry it somewhere inside me." He shook his head, his voice breaking. "Please don't do this." Her hand touched his face softly, warm and trembling. "You once stood behind me when I was too afraid to move," she whispered. "Now I will stand in front of you and make the choice you can't." She walked toward the center of the room, her bare feet silent against the cold floor. The drone still waited outside, scanning for signals. Elias wanted to scream, to grab her, to stop her. But something in her calm expression made him stop. "She wasn't afraid anymore, Lyra," he said hoarsely. "Wait," she turned one last time, her eyes glowing gold like sunlight through water. "Elias," she said softly, "thank you for standing behind me, until I could stand alone." Then she placed her hand over her chest and whispered something in her language. The air shimmered faintly and her body glowed brighter and brighter until he had to shield his eyes. When the light faded, she was gone. Only her silver pendant remained on the floor, warm to the touch. Days turned into weeks. Elias kept the pendant on his desk. Sometimes, when the wind passed through the open balcony, He swore he could hear her voice. A soft hum, the same one she used to sing while cleaning. He missed her terribly, but he also felt proud. She had made her choice, and not out of fear, but out of freedom. One evening, while walking through the city market, he saw a figure ahead. Silver hair, golden eyes. His heart stopped. It was her. She was standing beside a repair stall helping a group of workers lift a heavy part. She looked peaceful, alive. When she turned, her eyes met his for just a moment. There was no recognition. But she smiled, and somehow that was enough. Elias smiled back, whispering under his breath, "You did it, Lyra." Then he walked away, knowing that even if she didn't remember him, she carried a part of him inside, the part that had taught her to be free. That night, as the city lights glowed outside his window, Elias whispered softly into the quiet, "I stood behind you once, and you couldn't step away, but now you're walking freely. That's all I ever wanted." And with that he smiled, proud, heartbroken, and peaceful all at once, knowing that sometimes love doesn't mean holding on. Sometimes it means letting go.